So my name is Mark Leruste, and I'm the founder and host of the Unconventionalists, and I'm also the Chief Purpose Officer at the Ministry of Purpose. And our mission is pretty simple. Our mission is to eradicate career misery in the workplace. And we actually believe that clarifying your purpose is the ultimate hack to creating a high-performance culture in the workplace. So if you've never met me before, which is probably 99% of all of you here tonight, I, once upon a time, used to be country manager at the Movember Foundation. Anybody heard of the Movember Foundation? Yeah, cool. So I spent 4 years there, and I helped raise 2.8 million euros for men's health, got 110,000 people to take part, won a bunch of awards, but that's not why I'm talking about this tonight. One of the things I used to explain to people when they said, what's it like to try and run Movember across European countries? I say, well, you know the FIFA World Cup, right? They're like, yeah. Well, you know how they all try and play football in one country? We try and get everyone around the world to grow moustaches. And it doesn't happen every 4 years, it happens every year. Oh, and by the way, our entire total fundraising goal of the year needs to happen in 1 month. And so with that came a lot of pressure, especially when you know we're a global organization trying to all come together from different parts, different sections to create this one unique experience for our fundraisers. So I learned a lot about that. And by the time I left in 2016, over 5 million people had taken part in Movember, over 21 different countries, and they managed to raise 464 million euros for men's health. So thanks to people like you who supported, who cherished, and who championed. So a big thank you on behalf of now Movember, because it's no longer me, but I just want to say thank you for them. But I'm not here to talk to you about moustaches. If you want to talk about moustaches, come and see me afterwards. But actually, I'm here to share with you what I've learned actually from working with organizations, forward-thinking leaders, and pioneering institutions about what it takes to actually have a high-performing team. Now, I know it can sound very kind of like, high-performing team. And he was like, oh, God, here we go again. But I'm hopefully going to give you a little bit of a different perspective on that tonight. But for me to start somewhere, I need to start with a story. And this is a story that I share, that I love. And it's a young man called Roberto Canesso. And him and his friends and his old teammates from university decided to hire a 45-seater plane to go off and play a rugby game in Santiago, Chile. And in this 45-seat plane, they managed to get their friends, their family, and their fans. And they got off to a good start. They're having fun, they're in the air, chanting, singing, passing rugby balls. But then suddenly the team captain says, please fasten your seatbelt, we're going through a bit of a zone of turbulence. Now, as you can imagine, a bunch of rugby lads being in a zone of turbulence, what do? They start going, yay, and throwing the rugby around, but then they look out. And on the wing, they see smoke. Something's not right. And on Friday 13 of October 1972, the plane came crashing down into the Andes at the border between Argentina and Chile. Now, on impact, 12 people perished, 5 more the next day, and 1 the following day. Now, out of the 27 survivors who happened to manage to make it, they faced some of the most harsh and adverse conditions known to mankind. The ice prevented them to find shelter and warmth. The little food that they managed to scatter around in the plane, they managed to divide it equally amongst everyone. And despite the fact that they had no radio communication with the outside world, they were sure that they would be found. And so they held on to hope. But the problem was, help didn't come. And around 9 days in, they started to have to think about the unthinkable. And that is, the bodies of their friends who'd been conserved by the frost and the ice would provide vital fats and proteins to ensure their survival. And so 9 days after the crash, Roberto Canesso was one of the 4 team members to make the first incisions to provide the vital meat to survive for their teammates. Now, in the meantime, what they would do every day is go up to a little mountain nearby with a little transmitter and listen to the radios for hopeful help that would be coming. And 10 days after their crash, they heard the news. The rescue team was called off. After 100 attempts, both Chile, Uruguay, and Argentinian teams just couldn't find the plane because the plane was white. Although they'd used suitcases to create a cross to try and make an SOS sign, they couldn't be found. And so the person heard this message, came back down, saw his teammates and said, guys, I've got some great news. Got some great news. And they're like, what is it? What is it? They finally pulled the search party off. And everybody's looking around in shock and horror. What do you mean great news? This is terrible news. How is this good news? He's like, no, you don't get it. You don't get it. It's good news because now it's up to us to get off this mountain. It's up to us to make sure that we find a way off. The problem was, just a few days later, they got hit again in the middle of the night with an avalanche. They lost another 1/3 of their friends. They lost all the material that they built from the shoes from the airplane, the visionaries' glasses from the window. And that's when they decided that they had to start pivoting and going off on treks rather than just sitting around and waiting. That's when two members, on the 12th of December, 1972, started trekking across the Andes for 10 days. And eventually, they met Sergio Catalan, a Chilean arriero who called the emergency services. And eventually, after 72 days of gut-wrenching survival, the last 16 survivors were finally rescued on the 23rd of December, 1972. Now, why am I sharing you a story of cannibalism and survival on a Wednesday? This is Hum Day. It's not like Gruesome Day, right? Well, the reason why I'm sharing this story is I believe that this story holds the most vital keys to any high-performing team, and I want to distill them for you tonight. Very briefly, 5 of them. Number 1, every high-functional team has a very clear purpose. These gentlemen on the mountain had a clear mission, to get off that mountain, right? They knew that if they were going to get off that mountain, they all needed to agree and be aligned. Now, if you don't know what a sense of purpose is, effectively all it is that there's something that drives you that's just bigger than yourself. It's something that compels you to wake up in the morning. It's something that makes you passionate about the work that you do, because it's not just about you, it's about a mission you're trying to accomplish, right? And whether you're an organization, a team, an event, even a football team, you need to have a compelling reason to do what you do. Now, the university professor of psychology of Leeds actually found that not having a sense of purpose makes us more vulnerable to depression, anxiety, and stress, while Psychological Science magazine came up with the fact that having a sense of purpose increases our livelihood of living longer than pretty much any other factor in life. So it sounds like, okay, that sounds great, Mark. Where do I find my purpose? Okay? So there's 3 things that you want to be looking for in your teams and in your workplace when you're looking for purpose. Number 1, do you have a sense of belonging? Do you feel like you belong in your team? Do you feel like who you're working with you can connect with on a personal level and a professional level? Number 2, do you feel like you're having a sense of contribution bigger than yourself? i.e., are you having an impact? And number 3, are you growing individually? Are you having a sense of personal growth in your organization? Now, my question to you right now is, if I asked you today, right now, so what's your purpose? Could you tell me with conviction and commitment what that purpose is? If you don't, that's okay. You just need a bit of work and you know what to do. Number 2, high-performing teams understand that within their organization, within their teams, everyone's a leader. That's a bit weird, Mark. The job titles, I'm not a leader, and yet you are. Okay? So if you look at the example again of the survivors of the Andes, they understood that no matter what their level of experience was in medical, no matter what their levels of experience or rank into the team, everybody had to step up to their leadership. Now, for those of you who might have seen me talk before, you know I'm a huge fan of the All Blacks. I use them a lot in my talks. They're one of the most successful sport franchises of all time. They've won 3 World Cups. They've won 75% of all their games over the last 125 years. It's unheard of. When fans go and see them, they don't go and see, will they win? They want to know by how much. And one thing happened in 2004 is they went through a bit of a crisis. They lost badly to South Africa during the Tri-Nations. And what they found is that they needed to find new rules of engagement within the team to turn it around. And one of those rules, which is predicted in the book Legacy by James Kerr, where he draws out 15 different rules that you can learn from the All Blacks, is that they understood that in order to make the All Blacks better, they needed to make every individual better, because better people make better All Blacks. And they call this leaders at every level. And this is one of the fundamental pivots I've seen in most high-performing teams, is that they understand that everybody, no matter what your rank, your experience, or your job title, has the ability to step up to their leadership. It's something that no longer when you go, it's not my fault, but it may not be your fault, but it doesn't mean it's not your problem. And that's something that high-performing teams get. Number 3, high-performing teams adopt a legacy mindset. So what do I mean by legacy mindset? A legacy mindset effectively means that you understand that your time within this organization, your time within this team is finite. It may be a month, a week, a year, a decade, maybe longer. But there will be a time where it will be time for you to retire or move on. And just like in anything, especially the All Blacks, they understood this. They're playing not for themselves, but they're playing for the nation. They're playing for their ancestors. They're playing for the people who will come after them. And they call this leaving the jersey in a better place than they found it. And so my wish and my crazy dream for every organization I come across, whether teams, employees, or leaders, is to say this. What if your one mission was to make sure that by the time you leave, you left the organization in a better place than you found it? And what if you're leading a team, your job was to make sure that no matter what happened, your people left your team a better version of what they walked in as? And that is adopting a legacy mindset, that you understand it's not about you. Roberto Canessa wrote a book, Why I Had to Survive. And in this book he wrote, I was honored to know that if my heart stopped beating, my muscles and my body could be used for the longer mission of getting everybody off this mountain. That is a legacy mindset. Number 4, high-performing teams trust each other deeply, fully. Now, as much as I'm sure everyone here would probably agree with this to a certain extent, sometimes it can be really annoying to work with people. You know, it's something just like, oh, I just wish I could do everything. But you can't put up an event on your own. You just simply can't. You need a team who you can trust in. And so Google in 2012 went off to try and answer the question, what makes an effective team and what doesn't? And they created Project Aristotle. And effectively, Project Aristotle was to survey 180 teams that they considered high and low performing. And they wanted to answer the question of what makes a good team good. And what they found is, out of these 180 teams, leaders and executives tend to define success as results-driven, whereas employees and team members found that the culture within the team the most important factor to put forward. That was the first conclusion, that when it comes down to high-performing teams, it's not so much who is in the team, but how the team works. And they came up with 5 different elements that every high-performing team has. I invite you to go and check them out. I don't have time to go into all of them today, but I'll show you the number 1, because they rank them in order. And the number 1 was psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is effectively an individual's perception of the risk of taking personal risk. Meaning, in your team or in your company, do you feel safe to raise your hand and say, I don't know. I don't have the resources to do the work you're asking me of. I actually haven't got this training and I need it. Because if you fear repercussions, humiliation, or persecution, you no longer have psychological safety in your team. And high-performing teams need to have an environment in which people can feel safe to open up. And final, and 5th one I want to share with you, is high-performing teams understand the concept of existential flexibility. Now, what the hell is existential flexibility? Now, this comes from Simon Sinek, TEDx guru and all-time New York Times bestselling author, who basically came up with the idea that existential flexibility, in essence, is the ability to dramatically change a strategy to advance your cause. So I'm going to share with you last story. In 2000, the CEO of Netflix flew over to Dallas to go and meet with John, back then the founder, the CEO of Blockbusters, to propose a partnership. And effectively, the CEO, Reed, basically said, we're going to take care of your online business, and you're going to take care of our brick and mortar business. And they got laughed out of the room. Now, you've got to understand that back then, Blockbuster's business model was heavily relying on the fact that they were making a big chunk of their profits from late returnal fees. And so with a business model such as Netflix, which was subscription, it didn't matter when you return your DVD. You just enjoy it, and then when you return it, we give you another one. So they thought that was ridiculous. But then obviously a few years later, he caught on to the fact that Netflix was cannibalizing the market. And so he went back and did an internal campaign to say, we need to get rid of the late returnal fees. But this is what happened. One of his internal ranks, Jim Keyes, started to raise the fact that that would cost him $200 million in loss, and it would cost him $200 million to try and go online. And eventually, with an activist investor, his leadership was being questioned, and he was ousted out from the board. Jim Keyes became the CEO, and the first thing he did was to reverse the policy of eradicating late penalty fees. And you know what happened next? 5 years later, 2010, Blockbusters went bust, while Netflix was evaluated over $26 billion. Now, why am I sharing you this? Because whether you're in a team, whether you're in an organization, it takes massive courage, it takes massive conviction in trusting your gut, in believing what you see, and to be able to say, this may be what we've been doing so far, but we now need to change and do this, because what got us here certainly won't get us there. And if you remember one thing today, remember this. Having a sense of purpose is the ultimate hack to creating a high-performing workplace. That's it. Thank you very much. Hope that's helpful.